Hi and welcome to this Lavender Learning video. Today we're going to be talking about reluctant readers, and I'm going to give some ideas for parents who may have a reluctant reader at home. If you're an educator and you've come across this video, you probably will find it helpful as well, but there are some different strategies that I'd recommend in the classroom in addition to the strategies we're going to be talking about today. My name is Jane. I'm an Australian educator. I run Lavender Learning, which is a face-to-face tutoring business that also produces resources and these videos. And I'm also a mum to 4 daughters, so I know firsthand how difficult it can be to engage a reluctant reader at home. I'm going to be presenting this video in the usual format that I use for Lavender Learning videos, which is to have my face somewhere on the screen talking to you, but also present you with some information on a slideshow type format so that you can read along and keep tabs of where we're at in this conversation as we go. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to quickly discuss is what is reluctance to read. Being reluctant to do something means not being interested in it, not wanting to engage in it. And that's what we're talking about with reading. It's quite different from a child who may struggle to read, because struggling readers need different types of intervention to help them develop the code of reading. And then once they can read, they will probably read for pleasure some of the time. A reluctant reader is a child who can read, who has the capabilities, but just isn't interested and so doesn't apply them. And that is a different type of child from the struggling reader. So different types of interventions. So the first thing to work out is whether your child is reluctant to read because it's just very difficult. If that's the case and they're sort of not taking off in their reading, you need to talk to your child's educator and see if you can get some interventions happening at home to help the child learn to read. The other thing to think about is whether your child has vision problems, which might be impacting their ability to read. That could be that the words aren't they may not be magnified enough, the print might be too small, they may have some tracking problems. Just check those things as well and make sure that it's not extremely tiring or very difficult for your child to read. So assuming that those underlying problems aren't in play, then why is your child reluctant to read? There are any number of reasons why. They might just not be interested in the subject matter. They might have a very busy life and not have time for it. They might not feel the need to read because they're getting narratives on television, like stories from television and other games and things. They might have some peer pressure, which is making them feel like they shouldn't read, that it might not be the cool or trendy thing to do. They just may simply not have access to books. There are so many different reasons that a child might be reluctant to read, and so we're going to talk about some ways that you might be able to overcome some of those problems today. If you ask your child why they're not wanting to read, and they say, I don't know, I can just imagine the sort of pre-teeny, I don't know, then you might just need to observe your child when you apply some of these strategies and see if any of them help more than others, and that may give you a bit of an idea about the cause of the child's reluctance. And I just put something there at the bottom of this slide, which is to remind you that reading isn't a virtue. Nobody is better than anybody else because they enjoy reading. It's not a more virtuous hobby than other hobbies, but it is an important skill, and being able to read and engage with books will help children in their learning and just broaden their mind as well. But it certainly doesn't make them a better person if they read or less of a person if they don't. I'm sure that's obvious, but I do think sometimes, my child loves to read is put out there as some kind of virtuous, laudable trait, when in reality, that's just the child's interest, just like any other. Okay, just wanted to establish that early on. Okay, so strategy number 1 is to look for high interest texts. Make sure that the things that you have for the child to read are actually interesting to them. We as adults all enjoy different types of books, and there's so many books out there that there's no reason to be reading something that they're not interested in. So I'll just move my face down slightly here, and you can see there's some examples here on the screen. Traveling, sport, dinosaurs, sharks, whatever your child might be interested in. One of my daughters was really interested in war, and stories from the times of war. And so she went through heaps of those. And then she was into spy books and she went through heaps of those. So you find the child's interest. So make sure that you are using, to try and engage your child in reading, that you're using texts which they would actually be interested in reading. The other thing you can do is to relate the topics to their own lives. So if there's somebody in your family who's lived through an event, then you can get a book about that time and say, hey, this was about the same situation that so-and-so experienced. You might be interested in learning some more about that. If your child is really interested in a certain topic, try and find diverse types of books or genres of books about that topic. As an example of that, one of my daughters is fairly reluctant to read narratives. She doesn't love fiction. She does love cooking. So we often give her cookbooks. People buy her cookbooks as presents and those sorts of things. The thing with cookbooks is they're full of recipes, and recipes are all procedures. So she's getting lots of exposure to procedural texts. She can probably write procedures beautifully because she's just exposed to them in such huge volume. But that doesn't help her develop a sense of how to tell a story. It doesn't give her exposure to figurative language and use of idioms in our native language, English. It doesn't, expand her horizons and take her to new places and other worlds and different perspectives. She doesn't develop empathy with characters because in procedural texts, you're just being told what to do next. And so I'm very conscious of that and try to engage her with books that maybe are about people who enjoy cooking, or a story of somebody who's cooking opened opportunities for them in a narrative form. So those are the sorts of things to be aware of, just making sure that your child just isn't reading books and books full of just dry facts all the time. While that's better than nothing, and I want to stress that, and I will stress that a few times in this video, take what you can. That's a great starting point, but do try and make sure that there's lots of variety in that high interest topic area. Also make sure, as I said before, that you're giving children books which are at their appropriate reading level. If they're very interested in the topic, but they just cannot access the text because it's so difficult and so hard to read, then that's going to kill that little spark of passion. So we want to make sure that there's not a big difference between their capability and the level required, because that gap between those two things is where frustration can occur. Idea number 2 is shared reading. Okay, you can see where I am over here. So I like to link reading with other positive activities. So it becomes less of a solitary activity that they do on their own somewhere. Perhaps you might be picturing a child taking a book and lying on their bed and reading. Perhaps instead you pick up a book and encourage them to come and sit near you and you both read. Maybe you both read out under the trees. If you're in a shady spot at the beach, maybe everybody takes a book and reads on the beach, or whatever it might be. But it's a shared experience that you're doing with them and you're modelling it. You're modelling that it's an acceptable and enjoyable pastime as well. If a child is reading a certain book, maybe you want to read the same book so you can both discuss it and make it into a shared experience in that way. And then you can get into the worlds of the characters and make comments about things that you've seen in your own world that remind you of characters and that sort of thing. And it's really cool. I'm smiling a lot because there are so many times in my life with my own children where we both pick up on the same thing and it reminds us of something from a book we've read and we say it. Oh, look, that's just like so-and-so. Or, hey, this character reminds me so much of this. Or this person reminds me of this picture that I have in my mind of this character that we read about. And so I love that we share that. And so reading becomes this sort of social and bonding experience as well. And if you can do that with your child, if you find something that they enjoy reading and you're happy to read it too, and you can both then talk about it, that can really help. And reading aloud with your child, no matter what age they are, can be a really lovely bonding experience too. And sometimes that means you can read a book that's a little bit too difficult for them, but something that they really enjoy learning about or listening to. And in doing that, you're kind of showing them what's ahead in the future if they keep reading. Okay, idea number 3 is to start with books or texts, I should say, that aren't books. So if your child really gets intimidated by the prospect of picking up a whole book and reading it, then start with a website or pick up a fact sheet from a visit that you do to, like the example on the screen, an aquarium, or some other museum that you might visit, or a place that you go to. Grab the marketing material, grab a pamphlet, look at the websites. If you see something on TV that sparks an interest, look it up on a website and read it together. And get your child engaging with words on a page. It doesn't have to be a hard copy page, even. It can be a web page. Just engaging in that beginning to read. And this can be a really good way of breaking through the barrier of reluctance to read and showing a child how reading can be useful and interesting. And sometimes this will be a stepping stone then to longer books and longer texts. And sometimes it might not. And that can be disappointing, but at the same time, as I stressed before, it's better than nothing. So having a child read something is a good start. Idea number 4 is to reduce distractions. So when I was a child, I would read, and I could read for hours because there wasn't a lot of other things that I wanted to do at the time. So in the middle of a day, for example, children's programming wasn't on TV. There might be some children's programs before school hours and then after school hours, but in the middle of the day, the television, the programming, it was boring to me. And so I might grab a book and escape into another world and enjoy that story. Sometimes I can remember itching to get back to my book and having to get my housework done, my chores, so I could get back to my book. But children these days don't have that same sense of boredom and freedom of time, you know. They may not be fully scheduled to lots of different activities, but they get lots of stories and ideas and information from television programming that runs 24/7 now for children. And if there isn't anything on the multiple channels available and the pay TV options that we have, then they can go on YouTube or websites and blogs and click on links and watch things that way or read things that way. So and I shouldn't really say read things, because when we're talking about reluctant readers, I really mean that they get this information through videos and games and things rather than reading, because that information is constantly available to them. And that can distract them from reading or finding time to sit down and get engaged in a book. So if we can remove screens for a little while, sometimes that creates the space for a child to become interested in reading. Just as an idea for that, something that I do with my own children is on holidays and things, we will create a sense, like a sense of challenge, and I will put a space aside for this challenge where the children have to go in and take a limited number of belongings. I might let them start with 2 or 3 items each and a book. And then they have to stay in that space for a certain period of time. And if they can do that, then at maybe on the hour, or sometimes a little more frequently, sometimes a little less frequently, I'll give them little challenges to earn a privilege. So it might be to get some new food in the room, or to get some new items delivered to the room, or whatever it might be. I love these challenges because they work together. They came up with the idea because they'd seen it on YouTube. And being in that space means I can control if they have screens in there or not. And so instead of giving them screens, they'll take in a book. And then I often walk past and they're all lying there reading together. It's beautiful. So you can create that space away from screens if you need to. And the other thing is just to create a good space for reading. The picture on the screen here is of a child in a beautiful, comfortable chair. I actually disregarded many photos that I found of children in reading nooks before I came across this one. And the reading nook pictures often look picture perfect, but I can't imagine a child really just spending hours there. What you want is a space, whether it's a corner of your lounge or a space in the child's bedroom or a really comfy chair like this or a beanbag, a place that the child can relax, feel comfortable, not be in the center of everything happening around them and distracting them, but just get into a book in a place that feels physically comfortable and enjoyable to be in. They can snuggle up and escape into those other worlds. Create those kind of spaces for your child. And finally, the last idea I have today is positive social impressions. And so that's to overcome that idea that peer pressure can sometimes influence children to believe that reading is not cool, not trendy, whatever it might be. And so to overcome that, you can show your children that people from all walks of life enjoy reading. You can do that by taking them to libraries and walking through and seeing all the different types of people who are there, borrowing books, reading, working, all of those things can be quite eye-opening. The other thing is you can engage in fan clubs or book clubs in your local area. If you come across a book that your child really loves, you can engage on social media with their fan club or the author. If your child is keen to write as well as read, you can create reviews and go onto online websites where you can write reviews about books you've read. If you have people in your life who also enjoy reading, and as an example of this, my children enjoy reading the Harry Potter series, and so do my sisters and brothers, and my children often chat with them about the books and the characters. And I think that my kids really respect their aunties and uncles and think they're pretty cool people. And so being able to talk to them about reading shows them that people that they respect and look up to also find reading quite cool. And so I think that you can create those positive interactions around reading. We also always read the book before we watch the movie. That can be based on a book. But when we do that, we might invite friends over who also enjoy the book, and we'll all watch the movie together. And then, of course, there's Book Week, that day once a year where your child gets to dress up as their favourite book character and go to school. And you can really encourage your child to be part of that and to look for other people who enjoy the same kind of books as them. Once you start looking, it's amazing what you'll find to help your child engage with reading on a social level as well. Now, I hope that's helpful. If you have a reluctant reader and you're looking for more ideas, then please shoot me an email. As I said, if you're a teacher, there are probably some other suggestions that I'd have there, such as rereading and fluency timing and creating like a sense of personal best for children who may not want to read normally, but might be a little bit competitive and enjoy trying to better their best in rereading the same texts, which can also help with fluency and accuracy and just gets them reading. At the very least, it gets them reading. And parents, you might be able to try that as well. But yeah, there are other ideas as well for the classroom and how you can use some of these ideas. And then when you've got a whole community of readers already in your classroom or a whole community of potential readers, there's a lot of things you can do there. So if you need some more ideas, you have any questions, please shoot me an email to jane@lavenderlearning.com.au. Please like this video if it was helpful. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notifications bell so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks so much for your time today. I'm Jane from Lavender Learning. Have a great week. Bye.